Alright. I was in the hospital yesterday with my ma from 9:30 yesterday morning until 2 o'clock today. So that's the kind of Ireland we are in at the moment. So I have produced glass on it from sophisticated. So there's a bit of two things I want to do in this. Talk a little bit about what's happening and make the links to the strike, but also in relation to Rosie Hackett and getting Rosie her bridge down there. I'm hoping all these men in the room will help her. So Rosie got me on the phone and I said, yeah. So I want to say thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference this evening, an event marking 100 years since the lockout, although for more than 20,000 low-paid workers being on the streets. And it was a war waged by the bosses against the poor. And it was a time of much hardship and much struggle. And I guess as we celebrate the contribution of those ordinary women and men workers for the cause of building the labour movement or putting some bricks into the Irish labour movement, we just cannot forget the price that they paid for their courageous actions. The hunger and the deprivation they endured, the horrendous conditions they lived in, the deterioration of their mental and physical health, and the deaths of those who died in the confrontation on Bloody Sunday 2013, which will be reenacted on O'Connell Street this Saturday. Many were never employed again as a result of being part of that lockout. And as I said, it was 9:30 yesterday morning in the hospital, and every day as I walk on the ground in the grassroots in this country, we have to ask ourselves the question, how far has this society come? And from the Georgian house tenements of the 1913, where up to 100 individuals lived together in each of the households, in 2013, there are 98,338 people and families are on the local authority housing list, and some are sleeping on the floors of their friends' houses or else in terms of their families' houses. And there are families and many living in appalling conditions in the private rented sector, where there are many people making a lot of money on the homelessness of others. And then the local authority complexes where I work. I've worked on St. Michael's Estate for 25 years, and I've been part of the land there and the whole struggle. And there is the land struggle because there's 14 acres of land up there that is still waiting to be developed, haven't been let down 5 times. But there are flats in and around this country, such as Teresa's Gardens here in Dublin, where the rats are running along the balconies, and in the likes of Dolphin House, where the storage when you're in your bath actually comes up, and you're in your bath when it comes up. And there are places in Limerick and in Cork and all over the country where conditions are really bad, and that's in 2013, even though we should expect that the standards have risen in terms of housing. But there are also children who get asthma and illness as a result of the dampness and the water coming through a lot of the flat complex roofs where they haven't invested or put time back in, and where people, as you live in those conditions, where the value that's based on you is the name of the area you come from, the dirt of the place, the writings on the walls, the antisocial behaviour. There are many people who don't want to live in those conditions, and they don't have the power nor the choice to change it, because what they are is at the bottom of this society. And as I said, the health system in 2014, or go back to 1914, in civilising it, would be like St. James's, I think, which was St. Kevin's before them, and which was called South Dublin Union, which was the poorhouse. And my mammy, who's 90, was telling me about nobody wanted to be up in that poorhouse. They used to the blankets as the scarce and make the suits out of them, and many people died in what's called the poorhouse and the institutions. I worked in Simon, and I used to visit people in St. Brendan's where they were in the lockup ward, and for many, many years they're still like back in them times, and where people feared and they were frightened that they would end their days in the Union. And there are many now today, and I was a witness to it, and I've been a witness to it many times, while they're very, very sick, they do not want to go to the A&E units of the hospitals here in Ireland, where old people, such as 90 years of age, are left sitting for hours on broken plastic chairs with no vending machine where you can have a cup of tea or anything looking at you, and then sleeping through the night on a hard trolleys. My ma last night was there on that bed, was an 88-year-old there on these hard trolleys. And it wasn't the public workers in the hospitals and were doing their work. They were doing fantastic work, and we need to defend them. But there needs to be, we need to fight more against the cuts. So while the poor, although they have medical cards, are second class, and they wait, year in, year out for appointments for very serious painful illness in a two-tiered health system of 2014. In 1914, the bosses waged war on the workers and their families, and they did not want them, as to say, in a friendly union, or whatever the union was, a more radical union, or a social union, I can't remember what it said there. And they pushed down the wages because they could, because there was people who would step in. And now here we have in 2014, the fact that there's unemployment to the level it's at. It's not just because there isn't any work, it's because it's a policy of pushing down wages and getting us all to agree that if we have a job, we won't lift our heads up and we won't fight back. And that's something that people are falling into. So the same pattern exists. And like poverty was the order of the day, and I'm not saying that the poverty of today is the poverty of 2014. I would expect that it was more. But there were soup kitchens then, and they were run by the women that I'm going to talk a little bit about. And there are soup kitchens today, that we have our people queuing in different parts, and there's nearly a soup kitchen in every county in Ireland at the moment because of the policies of austerity. So instead of the bosses waging the war, it is our own government policies of austerity, which is a structural violence, and people, and those who are hurting our families, and they are the migrants, and they are women and children and older people, the disabled, the travellers, youth, men, and the regeneration areas that have been let down by the Celtic Tiger. Small businesses, because there are small shops and small farmers. And if we have anyone else to add to this, so these are the people who are paying the price for the legitimate debt. And it is along with the community and voluntary sector, which I am very active in. Like, the community and voluntary sector is being dismantled. It's just been dismantled by the minute. And what's happened is death by 1,000 cuts. So if you accumulate the amount of community youth projects and childcare projects and small projects across Ireland that have been cut, on a daily basis are what keeps people's heads above the ground. They are the infrastructure of those communities, and they have grown from the grassroots up, but they can cut them and close them because they don't have the voice like say the public unions or the bus. They don't have that organisation to try to stop it, and that people are afraid, like the likes of Shawnee Lamb down there, back when we closed the National Community Planning Programme, that's only about 3 years ago. 14 projects was closed over an email. People that were active and advocates and fighters out there, they were the ones they wanted to get rid of. So in 1914, women did play a huge role on the front line of the lockout, and in setting up also a little bit before that the Irish Women's Workers' Union, a union that fought for the conditions and the lives and tried of women and families in the society, and tried to encourage greater equality as well. And there are many women throughout struggles throughout the world who are usually in the background, and particularly working class women or peasant women or campesino women, whose stories should be told and could be told. But the pyramid of power seems that women remain at the bottom rung, and sometimes they're in the shadows of giants, as I said last week when I was talking in Liberty Hall. So we remain at the bottom while men are elevated to the peak. And we now have an opportunity for men and women to actually come behind the campaign. I know James Connolly was in there, and he's out of it now, and SIFTU are trying to push that they'll have James Connolly back in, and the Abbey wants to be back in. But there was a fair process, and there are 5 people left in the running of the bridge, and Rosie Hackett is one of them, Kay Mill, Frank Duff, Will Birmingham, and who's the other one? And they're all worthy of something, but I think on this one, we have to get behind, we have an opportunity. It could be a small step on rectifying the balance of power. And yes, Jim Larkin and James Connolly are the icons of the Irish Labour movement, and they are great men. But there were great women too, like Delia Lark and I suppose Markovich and all them get their place in the sun. But one of them was Rosie Hackett. She was a working class woman. She was a trade unionist and a national activist, along with other working class leaders. Rosie obviously had the capacity to organise and mobilise her fellow workers. The role of the messenger was useful, as it gave her access to the whole of the Jacobs factory. Now, as I said, you can't say that she was the only activist in there, but she was able to spread the message. It brought out, there's a fight going on whether it was 3,000 or 2,000. We stick with the 2,000, as they say, for fact. 2,000 women workers in support of the bakehouse men workers' condition, and they won that strike, and they also got a pay rise. So her second strike during the lockout related to the 3 women who refused to take off their union badges, who also need to be named in history. And Rosie lost her job as a result of this stand, and she paid the price, as I said, some community workers and activists has done so recently in this country, for just standing up for justice and for what was right. So Rosie, it seems to me, loved to struggle. She was a leader, and she got deeper and deeper into that struggle, helping to set up the Irish Women's Workers' Union and keeping it functioning, because she got a job in the union as part of an administrator, and then she became a member of the Irish Citizens' Army. And she triumphantly brought, and her nephew was up there last week saying that she told him that she brought the copy of the Irish Proclamation to James Connolly, and she stood shoulder to shoulder on the front line in the battalion of the Michael Mann and Countess Markovich in the Royal College of Surgeons, and was brought to everybody in the Rising, was brought to St. Michael's Estate, which was Richmond Barracks, and they were court-martialed there, and then they were taken down to Kilmainham Jail, where they were either shot or held. She was held for 2 weeks in there. And let's lose my head. Okay, so she was very much involved again with the soup kitchen, and like as I said earlier on, she again, instead of the bosses waging the war, was the government, and so like her, we have to fight back. We have to fight back against austerity in 2013. So when it comes down to Rosie's place in history, she is entitled to her place out of of the shadows and into that spotlight. And she has to be remembered and she has to be honoured 100 years on and illuminated for her serious political contribution to the struggle for justice and equality. She is of critical importance to the history of the women's movement and of Ireland. And it is not enough to have the token symbols of Molly Malone and the Bluesy and the Jacuzzi or the angels there pointing up to O'Connell. Women's contribution and leadership has to be recognised exactly for what it is. And, you know, there was no action that James Connolly would not support for the equal footing of women with men. And he certainly would not be fighting Rosie Hackett for this bridge at this moment. So we do need to get, I know that SIPTU are very much in pushing for James Connolly to be back on the agenda, but I think, like as union members, that we do need to get the unions behind the campaign, and we need to profile the campaign, and we need to work to influence those that can be influenced. And what we have is only up to next Monday. The decision is made next Monday on the 2nd of September whether one of them bridges over the Liffey will be called Rosie Hackett's Bridge. So I do believe that, for me, it's not that 16 bridges don't have a woman's name on it. For me, it's that I think that a woman like Rosie Hackett should have a rightful place in history and in this city. And that working class women's history has not been on the agenda and is still struggling to break ground. And so we have to look at the contribution of working class women, not only to my mother, as I said, is 90, she's 50 years a tenants activist. She was on the streets, about 70,000 was out for the rent strike and pushed the rent strike back. Like, there are women that are out there in history that need to be honoured. So where there is no struggle, there is no strength. So la lucha continua, and let's get Rosie her bridge.